It's my honor today to introduce Secretary of State Trey Hargett and Director of Elections Mark Goins. The Elections and Campaign Finance Subcommittee asked them to prepare a presentation for us and update us on their efforts to make voter registration and ballot security what I consider to be the best and most secure in the nation. While other states from Pennsylvania to Arizona and Wisconsin to Georgia had issues in the election in 2020, we had not a single complaint or challenge. I want to thank both of them for their vigilance and for their hard work. Ladies and gentlemen, the Secretary of State and Director of Elections.
You're recognized, sir.
Well, thank you, Chairman Crawford. Thank you, Chairman Rudd. And I'm so grateful that you've given us the opportunity to come and visit with you this morning, and that you had the wisdom to invite Mark Goins to make a presentation to you. And I kind of feel like I'm the salad for the steak. So I recognize that he was the one you really asked for, and I get the opportunity to say a few words. But one of the best decisions I made after becoming Secretary of State was to hire Mark Goins to be our coordinator of elections for the state of Tennessee, who has continued to impress me with his thoroughness and his attention to detail. And there are things that he would never brag on himself about, but I'm going to brag on him. And what a lot of you don't know is he's not only a leader here in Tennessee, he's a leader nationally. He serves on the Election Assistance Commission Standards Board as one of two representatives from the state of Tennessee. He is sought after by other states for his opinion on issues. He and I both have served on the Governing Coordinating Council for Election Infrastructure and has been a leader nationally. And in fact, just to tell you how well thought of he is, there's a lot of other secretaries of state who serve on the EAC Standards Board, and I could appoint myself if I wanted to. Instead, I chose to appoint Mark, and there was a pressure from other secretaries around the country for all of us to serve on it. And when I told a couple of them, I said, well, keep in mind, I said, Mark Goins has served on here, has done a great job for us. And they said, oh, no, you're the one person that you need to have Mark Goins on there instead of you. And that's a testament to how well Mark is thought of nationally. And he's going to talk a lot about election integrity. We made some key decisions in 2020. And I had the opportunity to pick your brain a lot of times during the pandemic, and as we prepared for how we're going to run an election. But one of the smartest things we did, and it came from Mark Goins, was we realized that the pandemic is here, we've got to figure this out and how to run an election during that. And we start talking about a lot of what ifs and what if this happened and what if that happened. One of the things that was at the very core of Mark Goins' advice to me was, he said, well, Trey, that we can talk a lot about what ifs, but let's keep in mind, whatever we do, we're going to abide by Tennessee law. And if you look nationally at some of the issues that other states had, it's where they may have chosen to color outside the lines a little bit. And you saw secretaries of state and attorney generals and maybe even governors and others who made decisions that were outside the boundaries of their office. And this legislature made very clear on multiple occasions as you came during the pandemic, and as you came back for, as you reconvened for the session, is you made very clear what laws we had and how we ought to run the Tennessee elections and what we weren't going to do. And that was very helpful to us to make sure that we gave clear instruction across the state. And while a lot of other states out there were paring back hours and consolidating polling places, we kept our polling places open. And in fact, we encouraged counties out there to expand early voting hours so that we could spread voters out and have less voters in there at the same time. And so we get a lot of credit a lot of times for how well things went. It's also at the county level. And our county officials across the state did a fantastic job of making sure that we preserve Tennesseans' opportunity to vote. They continue to say they want to vote in person. We had about 93% of people still chose to go vote in person, even people in many cases who got an absentee ballot. And said, I think I trust going to actual polling place instead. So we saw a lot of that going on. And I just want to thank you again for the leadership of this committee and the legislature for making sure that we had clear direction for how to run these elections and the autonomy you gave us to go do that. So thank you. And without further ado, the star of the show, Mark Goins.
Well, I don't know if I'm the star of the show, but I'm certainly honored to really brag on you and the election officials. And it's been an honor to work for Secretary Hargett. He doesn't matter whether it's early in the morning, late at night, This person is available for the phone, on phone, email. We've had conversations at 3 a.m. in the morning. We've had conversations, at 5 a.m. and then late at night at 11 a.m. Or 11 p.m. But that's Secretary Hargett. So I feel like I've got the necessary tools to survive. 2020, and this isn't part of the presentation, but Secretary Hargett, when he talked about the local election officials, and forgive me, I may get a little emotional because you all, when you went to vote, you probably saw a very smooth process. But if you could see what went into that smooth process, or if you knew, we didn't know who was going to be conducting early voting at times. I had one county that had 2 deputies in 2 different offices because the entire office had been quarantined during early voting, conducting an election that on behalf of another county. We didn't know who. If it's like a football game, it was the next person up, and sometimes we had to bring people from other election offices to help conduct those elections. And I really, the morale of election officials across the state, and this was not part of the presentation, but the door's been opened. When you're back home, if you get an opportunity to thank your election commissioners and administrator, please do. Because really after the November election, how we felt, not necessarily how we felt about the results of the election, but how we felt of conducting that election under Tennessee law and looking at some of the surroundings, we felt like we should spike the football for real because of the job that had been done at the local level and state level. And we've had a lot of folks leave as far as election officials. It's something that I'm seeing statewide. I've told Secretary Hargett I'm concerned about, and I see some of you in this room that have lost administrators. And some of them have left for jobs that I would consider not a lateral move, but a move that is not as, they're going down instead of up in many instances. But anyway, if you get an opportunity, please thank them. And then our heroes. Our heroes are the folks that work the polling location. They knew that there was a chance they could get COVID. We tried to make sure they were safe with the PPE and taking the proper social distancing stances, but, they were there for us. And we had over 17,000 poll officials that went to work for us. And today is National Poll Official Recruitment Day. But part of having 17,000, if you look at some of the issues that some of these other states had, you all as a legislature passed a bill that allowed us to open up the pool, particularly allowed us younger poll officials. Had we not done that in 2020, I don't think we could have conducted the election like we did. And there was some challenges. I mean, there were some folks literally 3 weeks before the election. There was a church that, there were some elders of a church that said, you've lost 33 polling locations, 3 weeks before the election. Fortunately, we were able to talk them into allowing us to use those facilities. But it was a lot of negotiation, Secretary Hargett, myself, and also at the local level. But let's talk about Tennessee specifically. In Tennessee, and what you really want to do is have a balance. You want to make it easy to vote, but at the same time, hard to cheat. And that's really, what Tennessee has done if you look at the system that we've designed. And let's talk about the easy to vote part. Easy to register to vote. You can register to vote online. Now, what's astounding to me, just last night, every morning I get a stat on how many people registered through the OVR. And OVR is online voter registration, but it's also transactions. So if someone has moved, they can go to OVR, online voter registration, and do that. 600 people yesterday took care of a service that you all are providing. 600 people yesterday alone. So this is a widely popular feature that we have. And the way that it works, it's very secure because you cannot register online unless you have a record with the Department of Safety. And of course, the Department of Safety requires a lot of documentation. They ensure that you are who you say you are, where you live, is where you live, and they communicate with other states to make sure that you're not a resident of other states. And that's actually something they've got a lot better on based on some laws that's passed that you all have assisted them with in recent years. So online voter registration, because of online voter registration, you can register there. Literally, if somebody's listening to this presentation, if you've moved to another area in the state, or if you've not registered to vote, I encourage you to do it while I'm doing my presentation. It'll take you 2 to 3 minutes to register to vote in Tennessee or change your address. You can register at the Department of Safety. We get a lot of registrations at the Department of Safety. So when somebody goes to renew their driver's license or has a transaction with them, and of course people are updating with the Real ID right now, so we're getting a lot of registrations through the Department of Safety, but other state agencies as well. You can register by mail, and you can also register at the County Election Commission office. So when I say it's easy to vote, the first step is easy to register. Now, what are the numbers? Well, the numbers are, as we said here, going into the 2020 election, we had more registered voters than we've ever had in the state of Tennessee. So it is truly easy to register to vote. It's also easy to vote. Early voting, 20 days before the election, as you know, you can actually go and vote in person. Do voters like it? Well, let's look at 2020 of November. 67% of your voters went and voted in person early. When you combine that with the 7% that voted by mail, 3 out of 4 of your voters voted early. Now, you'll have some activists out there saying they may not like early voting or whatever the case may be. 3 out of 4 of your voters, and probably the majority of you in this sitting here before me, voted early. Very convenient for the voter, once again, making it easy to vote in Tennessee. And of course, if you're eligible to vote, you can vote by mail. I'll go on that in more detail in just a moment. I'm going to give you a roadmap where I'm going. I'm going to talk about the list maintenance program, how we secure election data, the certification of voting machines, bipartisan certification of election process, and absentee by mail voting process as well. What's the list maintenance program do? Well, it serves to make sure that the voter registration records are current and accurate. It serves to remove anyone that's ineligible from the voting rolls. And when is it done? It's actually done daily. So every day there's someone that's being removed. And by way of example, so if I live in, and you'll hear a lot of times people say, oh, you got all these purged voters out there. I'm a purged voter myself. That doesn't mean I can't vote. Let me give you an example. I used to live in God's country, East Tennessee, Campbell County. And when I moved to Davidson County, I'm not saying it's not God's country, but the promised land is in East Tennessee, right? But anyway, when I moved to Davidson County and I registered to vote in Davidson County, I was purged from Campbell County. So I'm one of the purged voters. Well, that's one way that people are removed from the voter rolls. If I move to a different state, the other state gives us notice, well, we go through that as well. So let me break that down a little bit more. How do we find out if somebody moved within the state or if they moved to another state? Most of the time, we will find out that a person is moved within the state when they register to vote in that other county. Now, it may be that when I move to Davidson County, I've not registered to vote there. Well, if I'm not registered to vote there, then I'm going to show up on the national change of address. When I move to a different state, I notify the post office, well, we're getting that information. We do this list. We have about 200,000 people last year that we got notification that may have moved. Now, there's a process, though, because sometimes that's a misnomer. The fact that someone has notified the post office that they're no longer using that address doesn't necessarily mean they moved. It could mean they're down in Florida enjoying the winter, and they're coming back to Tennessee in the summer. So there's a process. You know, we send a confirmation notice that's not forwardable to find out if this person lives there. And if they don't send that confirmation at confirming their address, then we start the removal process. There's a cancellation report that we do. And this basically comes from other states. So if someone goes to Alabama and on the voter registration form, they say, well, I was formerly registered to vote in Sevier County, Tennessee. Well, we're going to send notice to Sevier County because they're going to notify us, and this happens all the time. While I'm doing this presentation, we're going to get some notifications. It doesn't stop. It's continual. So we'll notify Sevier County, or they can notify Sevier County directly. Deceased report. Unfortunately, I'm starting to see those numbers go up. I don't know if it's COVID or whatever the case may be, but by way of example, looking at the different agencies, most of the names we're going to get come from Vital Stats, but we had 11,000 people that actually were on the list from December that had passed. 8,000 of those were registered voters. Now, some of those, well, actually, let me rephrase that. 8,000 of those had a record with the Division of Elections. It may have been they'd been purged for other reasons, but most of the time it's an active voter or an inactive voter that we've removed. So 8,000 individuals were removed, and this happens every month. We get the list at the state level from Vital Stats. They also get the list locally. So your local administrator will be getting that information from the local funeral homes. There's various ways to get this information. And once again, that's done regularly. Let's talk about securing election data. A lot of the work that we do and the way that we can clean our rolls as actively as we do utilize the full Social Security number. And I'll tell you, that keeps me up at night knowing that we've got to secure that data. But at the same time, I know that it keeps our voter rolls as clean as we can keep them because we have that tool. So one of the things that we've done, we've brought in the Tennessee Bureau of Investigations and the Federal Bureau of Investigations to conduct some of our conduct training to our administrators and election officials. We're teaching them from the best, the folks that investigate how folks are trying to steal through cyber means, we're teaching them how to prevent that as best they can. We've done this at state seminars, but we really try to focus on this at regional seminars in a smaller group so we can talk about to them more in detail. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security, they offer security inspections. It's volunteer. It's not something that's mandated at this point, but any county that wants to, they'll come in and they'll look at the physical aspect of where we're storing voting machines. If there's a drop-down ceiling, they want to make sure that there's a firewall up in the ceiling so someone can't climb through the ceiling. They're very productive, and it's something that's been very beneficial to our counties. Secretary Hargett has authorized online training for state and county election officials through cybersecurity. It happens every month. And that's something that we offer to all of our counties as well. We offer it to our election commissioners as well, but typically it's the administrators and the folks in the office that does that. We had a third party come in, an independent third party come in to look at, to make sure that folks were patching appropriately in the county offices, and we also wanted to make sure that the proper computer software was there to prevent malware from being installed.
And to be clear, that's of the basic computer in the office. That's not the election machine or a scanner, because the election machines are not connected.
That's correct. This isn't for voting machines. What I'm talking about, this third party came in. They wanted to make sure. So we have a separate computer specifically for voter registration, and we want to make sure it's locked down. The state provides that computer, and we want to make sure it's locked down. That was something that they looked at. And then they also just looked at the general cybersecurity. Wanted to make sure that passwords weren't posted on the wall. So if somebody came into the, basic stuff like that, it was truly a cybersecurity practice, make sure they're put in place and the folks are actually doing it. Now, this is the one that really gave me an an awakening, if you will. A few years ago, I attended DEF CON. And it's sort of along the lines of the TBI and FBI. You got to kind of get in the mind of the criminal, if you will. How would they, if I were sitting on the outside, how would I attack an election official office or the state? And we certainly have experts on the governor's side that help protect. They have their cybersecurity folks. Secretary Hargett has a cybersecurity team with credentials that's incredible. One of the director worked for NASA at one time and has done some cybersecurity protection for a major corporation. But anyway, we go there and we learn how, if you were a hacker, how would you do it? I've had IT officials do it, and of course the IT director for the Secretary of State has done that as well. And from that, we've come back and we've done phishing campaigns, we've done social engineering campaigns, and that's where you call someone on the phone and you try to elicit information, or you go visit that person in person. Once again, we're just making sure that the counties are as prepared as they can. And Representative Rudd, Chairman Rudd, a few years ago, with very strong support of the General Assembly, before 2020, you passed a strong anti-hacking law, as you know, and you'll remember that. But above and in front of everyone else, this General Assembly said, if you come after the election infrastructure, we are going to put you behind bars. And I think that's a leader for other states to look at. We are in front. The other thing is, y'all passed a law that says if someone reports someone for voter fraud and that person is convicted, they can receive $1,000. And of course, that's on their application to vote by mail. One of the ways that some folks have said, and in the past, if you look at court cases, even in Tennessee, where voter fraud is being committed, it's where someone may have gone to this person and said, I'll pay you so much if you'll vote this certain way. Well, you can get $1,000 if you turn that person in, or you can get 20 or 30, whatever the going rate of a vote might be. I think that is a huge deterrent to anyone who wants to go out and attempt to commit voter fraud in this state. Physical security, there's a chain of custody that's maintained, documented in the Election Commission offices. Once again, our election officials on the local level doing a tremendous job. Let's talk about machine certification. If you want to buy a machine today, voting machines today, here's the process that machine has to go through. The EAC tests that equipment, and he said that, Secretary Hargett talked about me being on the standards board. That's a board that has 100 members, over 100 members. It's one from each state, a Republican and a Democrat, or someone who's in a nonpartisan position, and it's a local and it's a state. And we come together and we figure out what the voter would need, and administratively what you would do for voting equipment. At the same time, you have the best security experts in the nation They are coming up with guidelines, and we mesh these guidelines together. And that's what this equipment is actually tested to. And it's tested through independent labs. And on their end, when we get it, there's a Republican machine technician in every county, and there's a Democrat machine technician in every county. They also do testing of this equipment as well. We in Tennessee have taken the stance that before a vendor has their machine certified for use in our state, we want to see it used in another state. We don't want to be the guinea pig. You know, this is serious stuff. We want to make sure that we have the system that's going to work correctly. Secretary Hargett or myself, someone from our office, we'll go with a Democrat member from the State Election Commission, a Republican State Election Commissioner, and we'll view that machine being used in another state. The equipment is certified. Typically, before a machine is certified by the State Election Commission, it's been in 2 open meetings. And I know that Dick Williams is here. He's pre-COVID. He attended a lot of those meetings. It's a chance where the public can come. They can look at the equipment. They can voice their opinion if they want to about the equipment as well. If everything goes okay in the field test, it's EAC certified, and the public comment period during the meeting is sufficient, then the system can be certified. At that point, it's the local level that gets to choose what voting system to have. Tennessee doesn't have a statewide system. They have 5 vendors that's been certified, and the local level can choose which vendor they want to use after a competitive bid process.
If I can add to that, the machines at Hancock County are not connected to the machines in Washington County. None of them are connected at all. So that's important to note. And that's one of the strengths of our system is that all 95 counties are separated.
That's right. So if you have a situation where there is some kind of issue with a specific machine, it's not going to affect the entire state. It certainly would be an issue, and God forbid that to ever happen. But you've kind of contained the issue. And of course, they're not connected to the internet. You may hear when you're out speaking or whatever, some folks saying, well, what about Michigan? We heard that there was a modem in the voting equipment in Michigan. Well, Michigan allows that. Some states allow that. Tennessee doesn't. What Michigan does, instead of the way that we do it, the old-fashioned way, but the right way, is to transport the votes from the polling location to the county office, literally in a car, physically in a car. And that's a Republican and Democrat that's doing that. Michigan, they want to beat the news or whatever. They want to get the results as possible. So they allow, not required, but they allow the counties to have modems to where they can transfer the results from the local polling location. And this has created a lot of confusion. You know, a lot of people say, well, we discovered this in the 2020 election. It wasn't discovered in the 2020 election. There's numerous articles written about whether Michigan should do that or not do that prior to 2020. I'm not a fan of that, and I hope that this legislature would never go in that direction under our tenure.
Mark, I don't know if you're going to cover it. Can you take just a second and make sure that they understand how we get the results on our website on election night? Because I think some people don't realize how that occurs.
Yeah, that's a very important thing because there's some folks out there that spread misinformation that votes flipped after the election. Well, Tennessee, first and foremost, our results come in on election night. Now, they're unofficial, and there is a certification process where we go back and verify those. And then also, sometimes you'll have provisional ballots that may count. Somebody didn't show up with a photo ID or whatever the case may be, but votes marginally will change after an election. Nothing significant. Here's what the county does. The county will get them from the local polling location. They'll centrally tabulate those, and then they will send those through a portal. We've set up a portal, and we've given each county their separate bucket, if you will. And once again, we've segregated them, so if an attacker were to come after us, it would be very difficult to figure out how we've done it. But we don't stop there. So literally, you've got someone on the county level, and we tweet that. Secretary Hargett, this is his idea and his credit. In fact, I kind of shivered a little bit when because I was like, how are we going to make this work? And fortunately, we had a team, not me, but we had a team that made it work. He wanted to get the results out as instantly as possible once we got them. And so he has set up tweet decks to where we literally, real time, when that county sends them to us, we tweet them out. But before that administrator goes home, in case someone were to breach our website, and the only thing they've done, they breached our website. How did I know that? Because back at that high school in your local jurisdiction where that precinct is, the Republicans and Democrats have signed off on a tally tape that actually show what the true results were. So if they breach a website, the only thing they've done is breach a website. They've not changed what's happened at that local level. But we require the administrator to have a verbal conversation with someone in my office verifying the final numbers. They can't go home until they do that. So we have that verification as well as the verification that we're getting throughout the night.
But just to be clear, those machines do not transmit results to us.
Never do they transmit the results to us. And it's literally a manual process. The person on the local level are manually entering those into the portal coming our way, and they're getting it from the local level. Bipartisan certification of election results. You know, the best thing that you look at our system, the way it's set up, I think, is you hear some folks going on one end saying, oh, there's all this voter fraud, there may be in some other states, it's not in Tennessee. How do I know that? If you look at our process, throughout the entire process, there's bipartisan looking over the shoulder. Republicans aren't going to let Democrats cheat, and Democrats aren't going to let Republicans cheat. That's just the way it is. Republicans aren't going to let Democrats suppress the vote. Democrats aren't going to let Republicans suppress the vote. Let's go into a little bit more. When you look at the way their system is set up, the way that you all have designed it, and it's the proper way to do it, it's Republican and Democrat election officials that are conducting the elections. It's not all Republicans doing it. It's not all Democrats doing it. What it is, it's bipartisan support. And if you look at how the votes are counted and when they're even being cast, election officials count the absentee ballots. You have poll officials that's working there that have that bipartisan representation. Early votes are counted by bipartisan representation, and election day votes are counted by bipartisan representation. Each step along the way, you have that. And as I've already stated, the machine technicians, and don't overlook them, the important role they play, they set up they set up the voting equipment, they test the voting equipment, and they make sure that it's safe and secure for the voters of their respective jurisdiction. And once again, in an open meeting, the results are certified with that bipartisan support. After the election, the counties will go through, they'll look at the tally tapes, make sure the precinct results match the county results, and then if you're in an optical scan result, there's a mandatory audit process. We do think the audit process can be enhanced somewhat, so we'll be talking to you a little bit more about that throughout the session. Once again, I've already said this, so I'll just skip along, but from the State Election Commission to the Local Election Commission, there's bipartisan representation. Let's talk about absentee by mail voting process. In Tennessee, certainly the focus that the legislature has given, and I think the most secure vote you can cast is in person. You got the 20 days before you can come vote in person. And remember, 3 out of 4 have taken advantage, and 67% of those were actually cast in person. But if you do need to vote by mail, the legislature in its wisdom have given certain reasons, and it's common sense reasons. You know, if someone's ill and they can't make it to the poll, if they're a college student, they're from Tennessee and they're in another state, you all have said in those instances, folks can vote by mail. Once again, typically we don't have a lot of people voting by mail. I think it's the way that our system's designed to give the generous early voting period, but it does happen. How do we make sure that someone is not voting on behalf of someone else? Tennessee has chosen not to mail out mass ballots. You must make a request. So someone who's wanting to vote in Tennessee, you make a request on a ballot application. That's the first step for our election officials to verify that the person that's requesting this really truly is requesting it. So on the ballot application, when it comes back, we do a signature comparison. We do another signature comparison when the ballot is sent in. But the first step is on the ballot application. And then there's a law to make sure that people who register by mail, that somebody's going to see them, that this person actually exists, that I'm not just filling out a voter registration form and not be a person that exists. So if you register to vote by mail, the first time you must vote in person. Somebody's actually got to see you. Ballot harvesting is prohibited in Tennessee. If you're a voter, you're responsible for getting your ballot back through the mail. Double voting is prevented. I think Chairman Crawford sponsored this bill. A few years ago, I'm pretty sure it was you, but essentially the way that the bill works, or the law works, the moment that someone requests an absentee ballot and we receive it, we mark that person as voted. So they're marked. That means when that person, if they show up on election day, we flagged them as voted, we vote them a provisional ballot, and what Chairman Crawford did, he gave a safe harbor. The safe harbor is, if that person shows up, and we flagged them as voted, they vote a provisional ballot. If we've not received that absentee ballot, then we will count the vote. We will count the provisional ballot. It doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen. We did see a little bit more of that in 2020 than we normally would see. I think it was because of the pandemic. Somebody might get sick, and then they got better, and they decided to go ahead and go vote. Bipartisan double lock boxes, that's where the ballots are stored. Republicans have the key to one lock. The Democrats have the key to the other lock. They got it. It takes both to get in that box. There's also a seal that's placed on those boxes. If somebody sends in a ballot application, the signature doesn't match, we notify that voter. If they miss a deadline, we notify that voter. Ballots must be received by Election Day. I've already said that. And then, of course, a bill that's very popular is the watermark bill that you all passed this last session. Now, I realize, and I'm concluding here, and I'll be happy to take questions if you have them. You know, if you're an activist, you're getting emails, and it depends on whether you're Republican or Democrat, two different types of email. If you're a Republican, you're probably getting emails saying, look at all the voter fraud that's happened. And it's easy to lose confidence in the system. If you're on the Democrat side, you're probably getting emails. The activists are probably getting emails about suppression. But I think when you look at Tennessee's system, you'll see that we've met the voter in the middle. So what do Tennessee voters say? So the activists are going to be loud. I know you're getting emails because I get the emails. I get the calls. But let's look. So this is an independent poll that was just released last week. And it was amazing how the timing worked out for this presentation because I got it right before. They did this in January, but right before this presentation, and someone told me about it, and I looked at it, and I'm like, well, I'll use this for this presentation. So the Center for Excellence in Polling, I guess they're surveying other states as well, but it's a project of the Foundation for Government Accountability, and the poll was conducted in Tennessee, Registered Voters, 2022. 86% of the Republicans trust the system that you all have enabled us to carry out. 84% of the Democrats trust the system that you all have enabled us to carry out, and 85% of the independents, a total of 85%. You know, I would love to see it 90, 95, but under the current situation that we're in with, you know, just the atmosphere we're in, this is a win. In fact, the pollsters said this was remarkable. It's remarkable, and it's remarkable because, I guess, the numbers, but it's not remarkable to me because the administrators that I know that carry out these elections and the legislature that passed the laws, y'all have common sense legislation. Now, if anybody does have questions, you do get some of these calls from some folks that have really been conditioned to think that the system is so bad. But most of the time, the calls I get aren't really focused on Tennessee. They're focused on other states. But we do have a voter hotline, and, of course, you all know us. Many of you have my cell phone number. If you don't, I'll be happy to give it to you. I know you have Secretary Hargit's, but we'll be happy to answer any calls that you get from your constituents. Any questions that you all have, I'd be happy to answer them. But if I didn't get the point across, I thank you. I thank you for giving us the tools to conduct elections to where after the November election, we don't have to worry about the results. We have security in them. We know that the election was fair. And certainly, I'll be happy to talk about some of the legislation that we'll be bringing forward, or at least anticipate. We won't be bringing forward. Legislators will be bringing forward, but we've asked some sponsors to go forward and look at. One is to enhance the auditing process. That's something we're interested in to make sure that, you know, on the local level that folks can trust the election results even more. We also, when you look at what happened in some other states, and this is going to sound bizarre sitting here as the coordinator of elections and the Secretary of State, but what you did see happen in some states is the goalposts kept getting moved. The legislature said you can do this, but in many instances something else was going on. And in some instances it was a consent decree or, you know, a settlement being issued. We're not always going to be in this seat. You know, I know how we are. I know what we would do, and because we did it in those circumstances. But we've been working with some legislators to actually say if there's a settlement agreement on behalf dealing with election laws, that the Speaker of the House and Lieutenant Governor, legislature, at some point need to be consulted. That officials just can't go out there and do it by themselves. That's one thing that we're looking at.
Or some cities and other states are taking action to allow non-citizens to vote in their elections. We're going to bring a bill that makes very clear that a municipality or county cannot allow non-citizens to vote in Tennessee elections. We think that should be obvious based on our current laws and Constitution, but we're going to make sure that happens. Frankly, we're going to take a stand on ranked choice voting. Ranked choice voting, you know, we believe that the law needs to be clarified about whether or not ranked choice voting is allowed or not, and we believe that Tennesseans are not in favor of allowing ranked choice voting in our state. So those are a couple of other issues that we'll have. As one is we're thinking about right now as well. You mentioned briefly about some protections that allow the legislature to have a greater say in if we would choose to enter into a settlement regarding election laws. And we don't want any way that we can circumvent the legislative process. So to further clarify what Mark was talking about is we feel like there should be a way that if we see a need to settle in court some type of election law dispute, that the legislature would have a mechanism by which to be a party to bring suit against us to stop us from doing that. So that would be something as well. And furthermore, we're trying to flesh out how do we prevent a federal takeover of our elections in Tennessee. There's been a lot of conversation about that, and so we want to make sure that we're protected in such a way that we can represent Tennesseans and Tennessee law.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good to see you, Secretary of State, and your counterpart. Y'all both are doing a great job. Thank you very much for the integrity that y'all bring to the process. And the question that I've got, or maybe you can address this, is back in the 2020 national elections, there was the Dominion software issue that was running rampant nationwide. Can y'all address that? Because I think we have 2 or 3 counties that may use that software currently. And can you bring some confidence to people watching or listening to this that doesn't affect our elections here?
Sure,
Mr.
I'll be
Secretary?
glad to. And Mark, you feel free to add in. We do have 2 counties, just so you're not guessing. It's Williamson County and Hamilton counties. Hamilton County has used Dominion machines for quite some time. It's very satisfied by them. And by the way, in the law, it says if you use these optical scan machines, you have to do an audit of that count the day after the election. Both those counties did the audit as required by law after that election, and no anomalies were found. I share people's concerns somewhat regarding those machines, only because I think we want to make sure we give people what they need to know in order to have confidence in Tennessee elections. If you're watching the news, you may be familiar with in Williamson County recently, they had a city election in Franklin, and the Dominion machines did not perform as expected. But let's not lose sight of this. There were paper ballots. Those machines use paper ballots. They have a verified paper audit trail, and the count was finally done, not a recount, the count was finally done by hand counting those paper ballots. And everything matched up like it was supposed to match up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Had a question. If you had mentioned when people request a paper ballot, and then if in the process, some of the process, they change their mind and want to show up to vote, do you have safeguards or how you verify that?
Yeah, and that's what I was sharing with you with Chairman Crawford. That's part of the legislation that y'all passed as a General Assembly. As soon as that request comes in, they're marked as voted. So in our eyes, they voted. Doesn't mean we've received their ballot. It means that we think they voted. So you may have some individuals who show up, and normally they don't, but for whatever reason in November, and I think it's because people were in quarantine, coming out of quarantine, or in some instances they may have been told don't vote by mail, by some news source or whatever. We did have individuals who would show up, they hadn't sent their ballot in, they voted provisional. But when I say, I don't know how to quantify, it's still a small number. So in that instance, they show up, they're told, hey, we're showing you've requested an absentee ballot. We don't know whether that ballot's come in because at the precinct, we don't know. It could come in by Election Day. Remember, those ballots, as long as they're in by Election Day, they're good. So that person votes a provisional ballot. If, in fact, we didn't receive their ballot, then their vote will be cast when the provisional ballots are counted. And that was something that Chairman Crawford and Senator Lundberg, if I remember correctly, sponsored a few years ago and the legislature passed. So that safe harbor is there for the voter.
Mark just said some people are being told not to vote by mail. What he means by that is if you think back to the 2020 election, around September and October, the United States Postal Service came out and said, hey, if you don't mail your ballot, about 10 days out, we can't guarantee it's going to get delivered. Well, you had all these people out there who got an absentee ballots who all of a sudden got concerned that, oh my gosh, they can't guarantee delivery of my ballot. I better go vote in person instead. So I really think that's what drove people to make sure that they came and cast their vote in person. And Mark did a great job outlining the process of what happens when they do show up if they had, in fact, gotten the absentee ballot.
And that process is a good way to show an example of how y'all deliberate on things. So Chairman Crawford's real issue was that someone was in another area when they requested the ballot, and they came into the county and they'd missed the ballot. So the person didn't want to be disenfranchised. If I remember the facts, maybe it's on Senator Lundberg's side. But so you had that. You wanted to help the voter. So his initial thing is, I want to make sure this voter votes. On the flip side, you wanted to make sure that you're not allowing double voting. And so that's why you laid out the process like you did. So it's kind of meeting in the middle. You don't want to lose a vote because of they missed the ballot. But at the same time, you don't want someone to come in and do something wrong and double vote.
One more question I had from someone wanted some verification. If we have, say, a DRE machine at a county and they don't have paper backup at this time, how do we verify if there was a programming error, if there was a mistake made? What's the process of checking the machines to verify nothing happened?
Mr. Goins, you're recognized.
Yeah, so verification is a number of ways, but the first and foremost is done at that precinct level. How many ballot applications do you have? How many votes do you have cast? At the beginning of that morning, the election officials that's there, bipartisan representation, they make sure there's 0 votes that's being cast, and by printing an actual tally tape out. So you're from the beginning of the election to the end. So the beginning, you have the machine technicians. They test the equipment. They're testing the different. They're testing each publicly. Public's invited if they want. So they're testing the equipment, but it doesn't stop there. On election day, there's a test that's performed as well. And after the results are done, remember I shared with you, those are unofficial results. So those aren't official. During that time, that's when a lot of this verification is taking place. So the administrator and folks in their office, they're going back to make sure the paperwork adds up. And if there's say for example, there's 100 ballots or 100 ballot applications, but there's only 99 votes, what happened to that one voter? Did they walk out because they got frustrated because of the line, or they didn't see their candidate on there? There needs to be some kind of documentation of why that doesn't add up. And I'll say this, Secretary Hargett talked about Hamilton County earlier and Williamson County. Hamilton County has actually gone a step further. They actually bring in an accounting firm to kind of go through those processes and look at them as well. But essentially, it's a paperwork issue, making sure the paper that is making up that election match the actual tally tapes.
If I can add one more thing to that, Chairman's asked a good question about verified paper audit trail. We have been encouraging counties for the last several years to move toward a machine that has that verified paper audit trail. And not because we believe that there's any issue with the DRE machines, but frankly, the marketplace has moved away from DREs by and large. It's kind of like going back and asking somebody, will you sell me an iPhone 5? I mean, you just don't, if you're going to go buy a phone, you're not going to go buy an older model. And what we're seeing is that fewer and fewer states, fewer and fewer counties are using the old DRE machines. And when that happens, you're going to have vendors who quit servicing those. You're going to have a marketplace you can't find parts. And so frankly, we don't want to be the last island in the country looking at it and people wondering, why are you using a technology that's behind the curve?
And all 5 vendors currently in the state of Tennessee, they're not selling DRE equipment anymore because the marketplace got to where we thought it was going to get, and it's there now.
In this last election, did we have any election fraud in Tennessee? And if we did, what percentage?
Mr. Goins, you're recognized.
I can't say we didn't have any fraud. We identified initially about 20 names, so that's a very small number. As we looked into it, we're in the teens, low teens. It'd be up to district attorney whether they prosecute them or not. But that, in the scheme of things, record turnout in Tennessee, record number of registered voters. 3 million people voted, and as we said here, it's in the teens that we've identified.
If I can just extrapolate a little bit on that, Representative Shaw, is first, a lot of times, let's say that we're in the teens, and we share with a district attorney that, hey, it looks like Sally Sue might have voted fraudulently or just not appropriately, and not who they voted for, but how they voted, where they voted, et cetera. That DA may look at it and think, gosh, there was no race that was even within 1,000 votes or several hundred votes. Am I going to spend my time prosecuting that, or am I going to be going after somebody who's selling meth or whatever? So they're making those decisions, and that's up to them to make. I'll be real clear. They got hard decisions to make. The second thing is, whenever people say, well, how many cases of voter fraud did you have? That's kind of like asking THP how many people are speeding on the interstate right now. They can tell you how many people they clocked and how many people they pulled over and gave a ticket, but there's a whole lot more people that were speeding down the interstate than they stopped. I personally believe that we don't have a rampant voter fraud problem, but we don't have a voter fraud problem in Tennessee because of the safeguards that this legislature has passed that has given us and local election officials and law enforcement officials so many arrows in the quiver to make sure that we still make Tennessee a place where it's easier than ever to vote, but it's hard to cheat.
Yeah, I didn't even mention photo ID. Obviously, that's a big deterrent. The Heritage Foundation ranks us third in the entire nation. If they would have taken how we conducted the election in 2020, we would have been either number 2 or number 1. You know, looking at the laws that you all had passed. So in the entire nation, that's where we rank as far as voter security. What you don't know on this committee, what I do know, is there was an issue probably 2010, 2000, in your district. There was a person who actually had gone out and encouraged ineligible voters to register. And Representative Shaw helped us tremendously eradicate that issue. There was a voter fraud conviction. The person continued to try to do that. And Representative Shaw passed some legislation to curb that. So I commend you, but certainly things have gotten a lot better post-photo ID, but before pre-photo ID. You guys don't know that. See, I know what happens in various counties, and I know when he's asking that question, he's thinking of a local person who had convinced other people to do something they shouldn't do. And there was several convictions down there in that area.
How can I be for sure, if I vote for Trey Hargett, if he's on the ticket and I vote for him, what's in place that you can assure me that my vote went for Trey Hargett?
Mr. Secretary, you're recognized.
Well, I've got a conflict of interest in that case, you know, if you voted for me. So I'm going to defer to you, Mark.
Yeah, I think the presentation in the laws that y'all have passed prima facie evidence that your vote counted. The bipartisan part of the process along the way, that goes a long way, and just the integrity that y'all have instilled. You know, it would be very difficult. Like I say, voter fraud can't happen, but under the existing laws where we are right now, and it kind of gets to where Representative Miller was, when you're asking a lot of changes, I don't know that y'all need to be changing a lot. I mean, look at us, I think we're kind of a model. And that model plays into the fact that you should be secure in your vote. And you know, I think the local gatekeepers, you know, when you go vote, and it's troubling sometimes because we don't have poll officials in one area and we have to move poll officials from one area to another area. But most of the time, those poll officials want to work in their community. And many times it's because they're retired. And so when you go in, you're seeing your old teacher or whatever. I mean, that's really who's instilling the integrity as well. You know, these are folks that care about you personally because they know you, but they also care about the system.
The real strength there, Chairman, is that the bipartisan nature of how we conduct these elections from all the way through the process, from registration through programming the machines to the actual administration of elections on Election Day or early voting through Election Day and the counting of the votes at the end. That is a real strength that should give you confidence in Tennessee's elections.
Last question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
Be
sir.
brief. Could you just briefly explain what is the qualifications for a Tennessee voter, please?
A Tennessee voter, U.S. citizen, 18 years of age, and a resident of the county that you're seeking to register to vote in. No IDs? The photo ID is for verification purposes. That's to verify that when someone comes in, you know, if they say they're Mark Goins, we're going to look and make sure you're not Mark Goins, that you are Mark Goins, that you're not somebody that's impersonating him. That's really the background of the photo ID.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the pros and cons of hand-marked paper ballots or device-marked paper ballots. And you mentioned 5 systems being approved in Tennessee. Are there some of both of those systems, hand-marked or device-marked, approved in Tennessee at this point? Thank you.
They are approved, and Mark, you feel free to add to this. You know, I know there's a lot of conversation nationally and some in the state, and there's certainly a corner in Shelby County where some people are talking a lot about hand-marked paper ballots. I want you to think about on Election Day, everybody going to vote on Election Day, and especially this year when we have our longest ballot that we have every 8 years. And everybody is filling out, bubbling those bubbles on that Scantron machine and thinking about the time that takes, and everybody bubbling in exactly like they ought to. I think that's one of the real concerns with hand-marked paper ballots. I don't have a concern about the integrity of either the ballot marking devices or the hand-marked paper ballots. I do think what you will see is most citizens would rather be able to go up, touch a button, and have that machine fill out their ballot for them based on the instructions that they've given it. I think people's patience on Election Day will wear very thin very quickly if they are standing in line behind somebody who is bubbling here. Oh, no, made a mistake. Did I erase that good enough? I'm not sure if I erased that good enough. Let me go back in and keep erasing some more. And then you start getting into people not doing it correctly, putting a check mark, putting an X, a little dimple, things like that. So I think from my concern is that with a hand-marked paper ballot, and by the way, not concerned about the integrity of it, but I do have somewhat of concern about does it have the potential for the intent of the voter to not be executed. Do you want to add to that, Mark?
From an administrative standpoint, if you have hand-marked paper ballots, you can imagine, particularly for Shelby County, hundreds of ballot styles. And so you're relying on that person to get the right ballot. So sometimes there can be ballot confusion. Not integrity in the system, it's literally making a mistake because you're looking at 200 ballots. Hamilton County prefers hand-marked paper ballots, but it has hurt them somewhat in expanding the early voting sites. So whereas Shelby County has about 20-something early voting sites, Hamilton County has fewer sites. Now, they've recently gone to ballot on demand, which will help, and so they're starting to expand the early voting sites in Hamilton County, but there's a huge administrative advantage to have a ballot marking device, particularly if you are a vote center county. A vote center county means on Election Day, you're not tied into your precinct. You can vote at any of those centers. So it doesn't matter where I live in that county, I can vote. You can imagine a vote center trying to have all these different ballot styles, and you got multiple. You can kind of contain it with early voting sites, keeping them limited. With vote centers, you've expanded quite a bit. From a practical standpoint, and looking at a favorite on either one, I don't have a favorite on either one. I think it depends on what you're doing. If you're a smaller county and you don't have a lot of ballot styles, and you're not going to be doing vote centers, then I think that hand mark can work well for you. If you're a Hamilton County, then you're going to have to figure out how you can run that election without having as many early voting sites and contain any mistakes that you've done. That you can do. The thing that Hamilton County has going their way is they've just done it for so long. So that's an advantage there.
And just to be clear, any county says that they want to go that route, that's their prerogative. If Shelby County, for example, decided they wanted to use hand-marked paper ballots, that would be their prerogative to do, and we would gladly sign off on that. So there's 5 vendors, but multiple systems. So one vendor may have a hand-marked paper ballot system as well as a ballot marking. So there's multiple systems. There's more systems than 5, but there's 5 different vendors. So I don't want to speak incorrectly on that. And I don't want to confuse folks either. There is another system. It's very popular. Over 40 counties have it. It's a microvote system. It is a DRE, but it's not a paper ballot where somebody's marking it or a device is marking it. It's a receipt that's under a glass. And so as I vote, simultaneous with my vote, I can see. So, if I see that if I vote for, once again, I'll use myself as an example, Mark Goins, I'm going to see Mark Goins. It gets a little tricky when I cancel that vote because it has to go back up and cancel it out, but it will do that. So then I decide, well, I really didn't want to vote for Mark. But that's the microvote system. They've got that certified in Tennessee, and that's something that they're marketing as well. That also provides a paper audit trail that someone can go back and view. Microvote is very popular because of the service that they provide. Typically, if you are in a county that's had microvote, you know the person that's providing the service for you. Some of the larger companies, they typically have more bells and whistles on their machines, but you don't always know the person that's providing the service.
So, you know, each vendor has their pros and cons.
Representative Holtzclaw?
So to be clear, before the election, publicly, those Republican and Democrat machine techs test those machines. They're going through and making sure, okay, I had a vote for Holtzclaw, and I had a vote for Calfee, and I had a vote for Manis, and we know that's what we pushed, and yes, these machines are calibrated appropriately, and Democrats and Republicans do that together and do that with machines throughout the process. Does that help? Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your kind comments also. Let's say that Mark and I tried to change how we conduct elections in Tennessee outside of the confines of Tennessee law. And if this body, you know, what we contemplate is a mechanism by which this body, if they saw us doing that, could become party to a lawsuit to, frankly, keep us from circumventing you.
Okay,
So I thank you for the opportunity to clarify that.
clarify that.
Thank you guys once
Thank you,
again for being
Chairman.
with us.
Appreciate your leadership.
At this time, we'll